Welcome to this ongoing series on gender in Indian history. In today's lecture, I would be discussing the concept of engendering representational art. In this, I would be talking about historically representations of the body in sculptures and in various other artistic forms. The developments in the art forms and their socio-cultural and political significance also assumes the form of dominance of culture, ideologies and power. So any piece of art is not merely a piece of art to look at or to admire its beauty. It also conveys a specific culture as well as ideological understanding and the power relations that must have existed during the period it was made. So, materialization of ideologies like several ceremonies, ceremonial events or specific symbolic objects as well as public monuments, writing systems, all these take innumerable forms and all these can be very important and crucial sources of writing and understanding history as well as throwing valuable light on unearthing gender relations that must have existed. Here I would like to mention name of Geats, who developed the concept of culture as denoting a historically transmitted pattern of meanings that are embedded in symbols. So basically a system of inherited conceptions that were expressed in several symbolic form by means of which humans communicate and perpetuate as well as develop their own knowledge and attitudes towards life. Now, why is it that women were always a natural choice for depicting in art? Women have always been a natural choice for artists across the world, mainly because of several dimensions which their feminine self could portray. So artists have celebrated the feminine curves, the delicate features, the strong body language to ensure that the very essence of femininity is appropriately communicated. And this has also been changing over the entire historical period. Very important pioneering work in this field was done by the scholar Vidya Dehejiya, who mentioned that like in the literature, the majority of women in the sculpture and paintings are treated alike as generic entities, as if all the women were beautiful, all the women had a very attractive physical form, and there was some kind of a generalization per se that is conveyed through various sculptural forms. The poetry read in the courts or the dramas performed for this very selective audiences and the art that was admired by elite spectators were all transported into a very idealized, into an imagined world where women and men, queens and kings, goddesses and gods were all beautiful, nubile, attractive, charming. So this was the kind of image that was generally conveyed through various art forms. So the underlying importance that was laid on youth, beauty and the ability to attract the attention of others translated into specific power and authority, whether it was in the earthly sphere or it was in the divinity inspired art forms. So now in order to question or in order to raise doubts over this kind of male hegemonic symbolic depiction of art forms, there is a concept called gendered archaeology, where certain art historians or archaeologists have raised doubts and they have raised questions as far as the male biased narratives that characterized most archaeology up to 1970s. So they have shown greater concern for visibility of women in archaeological studies. And from 1980s and 1990s onwards, there has been a greater focus on the feminine and the masculine gender constructs in various art forms, and this is definitely a very interesting area to study and research upon. So as the feminist critique developed, by 1970s, a small number of women archaeologists in Scandinavia began to point out that women played a more active role in prehistory than had been projected so far, because traditionally men had been portrayed as hunters and food gatherers, while women had been portrayed as the nurturers, the bearers and the rearers of the family. So, the feminist critique of the male biased archaeology projected men in specific roles and also the providers for the family, while women were merely shrugged off as the bearers and the rearers of children. So, there was definitely a role reversal when new kind of approach was added to the research of the past, and recognition of female labor in Paleo-Indian encampments, in the stone tool making sites, and also in several Paleolithic cave art descriptions definitely falls in this category. In India, the first undoubted evidence of female figurine was found from the famous Neolithic site Mehergarh, and they are found in much greater frequencies from the period of later cultural stages, especially from the last stage of the Paleolithic period onwards, moving on to Mesolithic and Neolithic. So, the concept of female identity in various archaeological findings became very important. The various female figurines are identified with their biological characters and also morphologically enhanced sexual features and some of these female figurines could also be distinguished from a very distinct hairstyle or an elaborate hairdo. As a result, there was a deeper and an in-depth study of the apparels, the ornaments, which gave a distinctive sexual character to certain art forms. Also, the postures and the glance of the idol or of the figurines were also important indicators in understanding as to who were these figurines made for and what could have been the motive behind existence of huge number of female figurines during the Stone Age. Now, coming to another very interesting symbolic representation, and that is megalithic symbolic representation, which again can be traced to the prehistoric period. So, presentation of female body became more enhanced from the Neolithic period in India. However, the symbolic representation was found increasingly in the megalithic structures. These megalithic structures are both flat stone, that is, they are found lying horizontally on the ground, and megaliths, which are kind of orthostratic, that is, they are in a vertical position, they are standing erect at right angle with the surface of the earth. Now, these kind of structures even have contemporary relevance, because as has been studied by anthropologists and sociologists, the present day communities from central India and northeast India who still practice megaliths would explain that the flat stone represented female and the standing stone represented male. So, one can also undertake a deeper and an in-depth analysis of various other rock motifs, again belonging to the prehistoric period, and one such rock motif was Capulae. Capulae basically it meant a small kind of a depression in a rock. There are several other rock art motifs which are usually characterized as feminine or masculine. So, one such type is cupulae, and the term cupulae refers to a small cup shaped feature, structure or organ, and there could be a number of reasons for making the cupulaes, but the accepted reason that has been conveyed by several scholars who are working in this field is that it was probably made during ceremonies related to fertility. So, here I am sharing with you an image of a cupulae that has been studied at Bhimbetka. And as you can see that there is a depression, that you can see a circular depression and an engraving alongside. So, this was the typical kind of cupulae, and it is not only at Bhimbetka but several other sites also have these kind of images. Now, India presents the oldest ever known cupulae site in the world, and the cupulaes found from Bhimbetka fall in this very category. Then another visual that you can see on your screen is that of Daraki Chattan cupulae. Here also you can see that there are small depressions that were made, that were engraved in the rock. Now, coming back to the issue of prehistoric art. So, the rock art of India includes carvings, engravings and paintings. It is estimated that there are about 1300 rock art sites with over 250,000 figures and figurines. The earliest rock carvings in India were discovered and studied by A. Carlyle. Now, in several of these art forms, the depictions of women in the process of giving birth also indicated that they had a special position in art, and their aspect of fertility was looked at with awe and some kind of remarkable ingenuity, that it had to be captured in the art form. Now, when we are talking about megaliths, then one can mention that there are other rock arts in India where gender implication is quite obvious. So, megaliths are often erected in a very gender specific way, and these are found in central, eastern and northeastern India. So, usually flat stones that are lying horizontally on the ground depict the female, and those standing erect have the male implication. There are several sites for undertaking a study and an analysis of prehistoric paintings in India, but the two major sites of prehistoric paintings in India can be described as the Bhimbetka caves in the foothills of Vindhya in Madhya Pradesh, and then the Jogi Mara caves in Amarnath, which is in Madhya Pradesh. So, as you can see in these visuals that I am sharing on the screen, you can see that how the prehistoric art was used to depict the day-to-day life scenes, or the kind of life humans were leading at that time. Most of their time spent in hunting or in some kind of community binding, or in some kind of food gathering activities, and these are the scenes that primarily appear on these various rock art sites. Now, coming to the issue of prehistory and women. During prehistoric times, women's role was considered crucial in both the production as well as reproduction, and this false binary that existed or that crept in later on from the later Vedic period onwards was missing at this time. So, women at this time were very much part of both the production as well as the reproduction, as can be deciphered from the study of cave paintings at Bhimbetka dated 5000 BCE, which shows women gathering fruit, wild produce and hunting with baskets and small nets. So it was not as if only men were providing for the family, or it was only men who were hunters or the food gatherers. As hunters and gatherers, female existence has been shown in various art forms. So female biological functions did not restrict them from subsistence related activities during this hunting gathering stage of history. And women with very specific and very special kind of headgear were also made part of group hunting scenes, which indicates that how indispensable they were in the group dynamics. And ultimately life in prehistoric stages was all about community bonding and group dynamics, as the institution of family or the institutionalization of family had still not been complete, and it was still more of a band society. So therefore, a question that arises here is that was there an absence of gender division of labor? And it has been suggested that during this period gender division of labor had not really emerged fully, and both the genders have been depicted as sharing various daily performing daily chores, and it is not as if there is a demarcation as to women cannot be shown in hunting scenes or women can only be shown while performing domestic jobs. The explicit depiction of a woman carrying 2 children in a basket on her shoulders in addition to an animal on her head. This kind of a painting shows that how women were able to manage both the domestic as well as the outside responsibilities, and it was also something that was considered as very natural. Then pregnant women carrying baskets and nets was also a very fairly common sight, and a woman pulling along a deer by its horns and also actively fishing. This all indicates the multifaceted roles played by women in prehistoric cultures, and this has also been discussed at length by several historians. Now, what emerges out of this discussion is the absence of rigid binaries. The cave paintings in central India convey that during the hunting gathering stage, the rigid gender binaries between the males and the females had not yet developed, and hence no predefined sexual division of labor that was based on the notion that men hunt and women gather. So it could also be that men would gather and women would hunt. But sadly, this kind of understanding developed only when these issues were raised and discussed at length by the archaeologists and the historians who had this kind of bent of mind to study gender relations. And prior to that, it was generally projected that hunting and food gathering were the activities that had been the mainstay of the male members of the band societies. Now, another interesting fact that has emerged out of an in-depth analysis of these prehistoric art forms is the importance of reproductive role of women. The prehistoric paintings prominently displayed the reproductive role of females, as many paintings thematically depicted pregnant women, women as nurturers, as mothers, as giving birth to child, which has been deciphered as the mother goddess, as has been mentioned by Uma Chakravarti. So, several Stone Age paintings, when one takes into account the representations in these paintings or literature or sculpture or ritual and customs, etc., indicate the kind of gender insights that can emerge out of this kind of analysis. Since women's role was considered crucial in both production and reproduction, the same can be discerned from the study of cave paintings at Bhimbetka dated 5000 BCE. As you can see in some of these visuals that are being shown on your screen, you can see that women are carrying on their head nets or a basket, and they are performing several tasks even in their stage of pregnancy. Then you can see the images on the as per the cave art, which again are showing that how a pregnant woman is looking at or trying to hunt another animal, which again had signs of pregnancy. And then another image where you can see that how a woman is the source of of milk or of any kind of production process or grains that were kind of oozing out of her body, which again showed some kind of a fertility. It can be considered as a symbol of fertility and production. So rock art definitely indicates female sexuality as well as women in productive capacity, and the prominent theme that appeared in the prehistoric paintings at Kathotia, Bhimbetka and Kharwai, they all indicate this kind of an understanding. Such a socio-historical stage has been described as matristic, that is, a society that does not consider women as subordinate to men, something that had been discussed by Neumayer. So therefore, in this kind of a matristic description of a society, one can definitely consider lack of gender binaries that were this kind of division between the masculine and the feminine probably did not exist. Now, having discussed the prehistoric art in greater detail, I would now move on to the next stage of understanding, and that is the proto-historic cultural stage of development. For prehistoric stage, one can say that the absence of any kind of literary material or reading material or absence of writing can be considered as indicating the prehistoric stage of history. Now, after that comes the proto-historic cultural stage, when writing had been developed, but the writing has not been deciphered. Now, this particular stage in the context of Indian subcontinent can be considered to be of Indus Valley civilization, the Bronze Age civilization, when the specific proto-historic cultural stage appeared, and we would be taking up a detailed discussion of prehistoric cultural art formation with specific reference to gender implications. Thank you.